For centuries, the Vatican has stood as a symbol of unshakable tradition, a place where time seems to pause amidst the ever-changing world. But even within these sacred walls, moments of unexpected change can ripple through history like a thunderclap. Today, the world watches as whispers emerge of a profound transformation within the papacy. A change so startling, so unprecedented, that it has left the heart of the Church trembling. The Vatican has faced upheavals before, but this moment feels different. Something deeper is stirring, something that challenges the very essence of what the Church has always known. What is happening within these ancient walls, and what does it mean for the future of one of the world's most enduring institutions? The papacy, an ever-evolving role. The role of the Pope has always been unique. As the leader of the Roman Catholic Church, the Pope is seen by Catholics as the spiritual successor to St. Peter, the apostle chosen by Jesus to lead his followers. But the way popes have carried out this role has shifted dramatically over the centuries. From humble beginnings as spiritual guides for early Christians to becoming some of the most influential figures in global politics, the papacy has been a story of transformation, adaptation, and resilience. In the early days of Christianity, the Pope's role was simple but deeply meaningful. These first leaders, often referred to as the bishops of Rome, were responsible for guiding their local Christian communities in a hostile world. Christianity was a minority faith, and early popes like St. Peter, St. Linus, and St. Clement faced persecution, even death, for their beliefs. At this time, the Pope was primarily a spiritual shepherd, offering teachings, writing letters, and serving as a unifying voice for a scattered and vulnerable group of believers. Imagine trying to hold a community together when every gathering could put your life at risk. That's what these early popes did. Their primary focus wasn't power or influence. It was survival, spiritual nourishment, and spreading the message of Christ. They weren't celebrities or heads of state. They were defenders of the faith during dangerous times. As Christianity grew in popularity, especially after Emperor Constantine legalized it in 313 AD, the role of the Pope began to change. Suddenly, the Church wasn't an underground movement anymore. It became a powerful institution, and with power came new responsibilities for the Pope. By the time Christianity became the official religion of the Roman Empire, the Pope was not just a spiritual leader, he was also a political figure. During the Middle Ages, the Pope became one of the most powerful people in Europe. Popes like Gregory VII and Innocent III wielded enormous influence, not just over the Church, but over kings and emperors. They brokered peace treaties, crowned rulers, and even launched military campaigns, such as the Crusades. At this time, the papacy was not just about faith, it was about governing a vast and diverse religious empire. For instance, Innocent III, who reigned in the early 13th century, claimed authority over all secular rulers. He excommunicated kings, intervened in political disputes, and made decisions that affected millions of people. The idea of the Pope as a humble shepherd was still there in theory, but in practice, the Pope had become a figure of immense temporal power. But no reign of power lasts without challenges. By the late Middle Ages, the authority of the papacy began to waver. Corruption within the Church, political infighting, and scandals like the Avignon papacy, when the popes resided in France rather than Rome, led many people to question the integrity of the institution. This disillusionment eventually boiled over in the 16th century with the Protestant Reformation. The Reformation, led by figures like Martin Luther, was a seismic moment in church history. It split Christianity into different denominations and stripped the Pope of much of his influence, especially in Northern Europe. In response, the Catholic Church launched the Counter-Reformation, a movement aimed at reforming itself and reasserting papal authority. The Council of Trent, 1545 to 1563, played a major role in this effort, reaffirming Catholic doctrines and addressing corruption. But the Pope's power was never quite the same again. Fast forward to the modern era, and the role of the Pope looks very different from the days of Innocent III or even the Counter-Reformation. Today's popes are less about wielding political power and more about being moral leaders on a global stage. They address issues that go far beyond the Church, speaking out on poverty, human rights, climate change, and peace. Take Pope Francis, for example. His papacy has been defined by humility and outreach. From living in a modest guest house instead of the grand apostolic palace, to prioritizing issues like the environment, Pope Francis has worked to bring the Church closer to ordinary people. His encyclical Laudato Si', which calls for urgent action on climate change, has been praised worldwide, not just by Catholics, but by leaders of other faiths and even atheists. This transformation of the papacy into a voice for global issues didn't happen overnight. It reflects a larger shift in the Church itself. Popes are no longer seen as rulers of a religious empire. They are moral compasses in a world that often feels rudderless. One of the most transformative moments in the Vatican's history came in the 1960s with the Second Vatican Council, commonly known as Vatican II. Called by Pope John XXIII, this council was a bold attempt to modernize the Church and make it more relevant to contemporary life. Over several years, bishops and theologians from around the world gathered to discuss how the Church could better engage with modern society. The changes that came out of Vatican II were monumental. For the first time, the Church emphasized dialogue with other religions, recognizing the value in faith traditions outside of Christianity. The Council also allowed Mass to be celebrated in local languages instead of Latin, making the liturgy more accessible to ordinary people. It encouraged greater participation by lay people in the life of the Church and redefined the Church's mission in the modern world. Vatican II was a turning point, signaling a shift from a more insular, tradition-bound Church to one that was open, inclusive, and willing to adapt. It wasn't without controversy. Many Catholics felt the changes went too far, while others felt they didn't go far enough. But it undeniably marked a new chapter in the papacy's evolving role. Today, the Pope walks a fine line between tradition and progress. On one hand, he is the guardian of a 2,000-year-old faith with deeply held doctrines. On the other, he is a figure who must address modern challenges that his predecessors couldn't have imagined. Everything from social media to artificial intelligence. The papacy remains a fascinating paradox, deeply rooted in history, yet constantly evolving to meet the needs of the present. And this ability to adapt while holding on to core values is what has kept the papacy relevant through centuries of change. So when we talk about the transformation of the papacy, we're not just looking at one moment or one pope. We're looking at a centuries-long journey of growth, resilience, and reinvention. One that continues to unfold with every new leader who steps into the shoes of the fisherman. Notable transformations of past popes. The history of the papacy is filled with moments of transformation. Times when popes took bold steps that forever altered the course of the Catholic Church. These changes were often met with a mixture of joy, sorrow, and even controversy, but they were always significant. When Angelo Giuseppe Roncalli became Pope John XXIII in 1958, no one expected him to shake things up. He was already in his late 70s, a man many assumed would serve as a quiet, transitional pope. But John XXIII surprised everyone. He quickly earned the nickname the Good Pope for his warmth, humility, and genuine love for humanity. His most transformative act, calling the Second Vatican Council, commonly known as Vatican II. This council, which began in 1962, was nothing short of revolutionary. It aimed to modernize the Church, making it more relevant in a rapidly changing world. Before Vatican II, the Church's rituals were rigid and distant, with Mass being conducted in Latin and the priest facing away from the congregation. Vatican II changed that. It encouraged the use of local languages in Mass, allowing people to feel more connected to their faith. The Council also emphasized the Church's role in promoting social justice, interfaith dialogue, and outreach to those in need. The Vatican, a place deeply rooted in tradition, was shaken to its core. While many clergy and lay people embraced these changes with open arms, others were resistant. For some, this modernization was long overdue, bringing tears of joy. For others, it felt like a loss of sacred tradition, leading to sorrow and even anger. Pope John XXIII didn't live to see the Council's conclusion. He passed away in 1963. But his legacy as a transformative figure endures. His vision reshaped the Church, proving that even the most established institutions can evolve. Jorge Mario Bergoglio, who became Pope Francis in 2013, has brought a different kind of transformation to the Vatican. From the very moment he stepped onto the balcony of St. Peter's Basilica, his humility was evident. Unlike his predecessors, he chose not to wear the traditional red shoes or the lavish papal regalia. Instead, he presented himself simply, asking the crowd to pray for him. This small gesture set the tone for a papacy focused on humility, simplicity, and service. Francis has tackled some of the Church's most pressing issues head-on, earning both praise and criticism. He's been a vocal advocate for addressing climate change, famously releasing the encyclical Laudato Si, which called on Catholics and all people to care for the environment. This was a groundbreaking move, linking faith with ecological responsibility in a way no pope had before. He's also worked tirelessly on reforms within the Church, particularly in addressing sexual abuse scandals. While these efforts have been met with mixed success, his willingness to confront these painful issues has been seen as a step toward healing and accountability. Francis has further challenged the Church to be more inclusive, extending compassion and understanding to marginalized groups, including LGBTQ+ individuals and divorced Catholics. These efforts have brought tears of joy to many who see Pope Francis as a breath of fresh air, a leader who prioritizes love and compassion over rigid doctrine. But his papacy hasn't been without its challenges. Some traditionalists within the Church feel he's gone too far, accusing him of diluting core teachings. This tension has made Francis a polarizing figure, both within the Vatican and the global Catholic community. Yet, his transformative impact is undeniable. He's reshaped how the world sees the papacy, making it more approachable and relevant in the 21st century. If John XXIII and Francis were transformative for their actions while in office, Pope Benedict XVI made history through his resignation. In February 2013, Benedict shocked the world by stepping down, a move not seen in over 600 years. For context, the last pope to resign was Gregory XII in 1415, during a time of great political and religious turmoil. Benedict, born Joseph Ratzinger, was known as a brilliant theologian and a staunch defender of traditional Catholic doctrine. His papacy, which began in 2005, was marked by intellectual rigor but also controversy. He faced immense challenges, including the ongoing fallout from sexual abuse scandals within the Church and growing secularism in the West. By the time he resigned, Benedict cited his declining health and inability to fulfill the demanding role of the papacy. This decision was seen as an act of humility and self-awareness, prioritizing the Church's needs over his personal pride. However, it also sparked widespread speculation. Was he pressured to resign? Was there something more behind the scenes? While Benedict maintained that his decision was purely personal, his resignation opened the door to new questions about the nature of papal leadership. For many, Benedict's resignation brought tears of sorrow. He was deeply respected by traditionalists who valued his conservative approach and his profound theological insights. But for others, his decision was a moment of hope, a sign that even the papacy could adapt to the realities of modern life. His resignation paved the way for Pope Francis, a leader with a very different style and vision for the Church. Symbolic transformations in the Vatican's history. The Vatican is often seen as a timeless institution rooted in tradition. But if you dig deeper, you'll find it's also a symbol of profound transformation. From its art and architecture to its cultural and social evolution, the Vatican has continually adapted to the changing times, balancing its ancient heritage with the need to remain relevant in the modern world. Imagine walking into St. Peter's Basilica, with its towering dome and awe-inspiring interiors. It's hard to believe that this magnificent structure wasn't always part of the Vatican's landscape. The original basilica, built by Emperor Constantine in the 4th century, stood for over 1,000 years. By the Renaissance, it had deteriorated significantly and symbolized the need for a renewal, not just of the building, but of the church itself. The decision to rebuild St. Peter's Basilica in the early 16th century was monumental. It wasn't just about constructing a new church, it was a declaration that the Vatican was entering a new era. Designed by some of the greatest minds of the time, including Michelangelo and Bernini, the basilica became a masterpiece of Renaissance architecture. The majestic dome, designed by Michelangelo, symbolized the unity of heaven and earth, a fitting metaphor for the church's mission. But the project wasn't without controversy. The funding of the basilica, partly through the sale of indulgences, sparked criticism, and became one of the catalysts for the Protestant Reformation. Despite this, the finished basilica stood as a triumphant symbol of the Catholic Church's resilience and its ability to adapt and renew itself in the face of challenges. If St. Peter's Basilica symbolizes architectural transformation, the Sistine Chapel represents a transformation of the Vatican's artistic soul. When Pope Julius II commissioned Michelangelo to paint the chapel's ceiling in 1508, it was a groundbreaking moment. At the time, Michelangelo considered himself more of a sculptor than a painter and was initially reluctant to take on the project. Little did he know his work would become one of the most iconic achievements in the history of art. The ceiling's central panels tell the story of Genesis, from the creation of Adam to the expulsion from Eden. The vivid imagery and dynamic compositions were unlike anything seen before in religious art. Michelangelo's work transformed the chapel from a functional space for papal ceremonies into a spiritual masterpiece that inspires millions of visitors each year. Years later, Michelangelo would return to paint the Last Judgment on the chapel's altar wall. This dramatic depiction of Christ's second coming further cemented the Sistine Chapel as a symbol of the Vatican's ability to embrace bold, transformative ideas. Even today, standing under Michelangelo's frescoes feels like stepping into a moment of divine creativity and change. Beyond art and architecture, the Vatican has undergone significant social and cultural transformations, often in response to shifts in global society. One of the most notable changes has been its evolving stance on social issues, such as human rights, science, and gender roles. For centuries, the Church was seen as an unyielding authority, often clashing with new ideas. Think of the infamous trial of Galileo, who was condemned for supporting the heliocentric model of the universe. Fast forward to the 20th century, and we see a very different Vatican. In 1992, Pope John Paul II officially acknowledged the Church's error in Galileo's case, marking a moment of humility and progress. Similarly, the Vatican has taken steps to address human rights issues. Popes in the modern era have spoken out against war, poverty, and inequality. Pope Francis, for example, has been a vocal advocate for environmental protection and economic justice, calling for a culture of care in his encyclical Laudato Si. While the Church still faces criticism for its stance on some issues, these efforts show a willingness to engage with modern concerns. The role of women in the Church remains a contentious topic, but there have been subtle shifts. Women now hold more leadership positions within Vatican institutions than ever before, and there's growing dialogue about their contributions to the Church's mission. While these changes may seem slow, they reflect a Vatican that's beginning to embrace a broader understanding of equality. In the 21st century, even the Vatican has stepped into the digital age. Just a few decades ago, it would have been hard to imagine the Pope tweeting or posting on Instagram, but that's exactly what we see today. Under Pope Benedict XVI, the Vatican launched its first Twitter account, and Pope Francis has taken it further, using social media to connect with millions of people worldwide. This shift isn't just about staying relevant. It's a strategic move to spread the Church's message in an increasingly digital world. Social media has allowed the Vatican to reach younger generations, share its teachings instantly, and even address crises in real time. For example, during the COVID-19 pandemic, Pope Francis used social media and live streaming to connect with Catholics who couldn't attend Mass in person. The Vatican's embrace of technology also extends to its archives and museums. Digitization projects have made historical documents and art accessible to people around the globe, breaking down barriers and fostering a deeper appreciation for its cultural treasures. What transformation means for the Vatican today. The Vatican, often seen as the unwavering heart of the Catholic Church, is no stranger to change. But in today's world, transformation isn't just an option, it's a necessity. Under Pope Francis, the Church has been navigating a path of reform, transparency, and inclusivity, all while facing some of its greatest modern challenges. For decades, the Catholic Church has been grappling with scandals that have shaken the trust of millions worldwide. From financial mismanagement to the tragic revelations of abuse, these issues have cast a long shadow over its moral authority. Recognizing the urgency of the situation, Pope Francis has taken bold steps to tackle these crises head-on. One of his most notable efforts has been improving financial transparency. In the past, the Vatican's finances were notoriously opaque, leading to widespread criticism and suspicions of corruption. Pope Francis established new oversight bodies and even allowed external audits to ensure that the Vatican Bank, officially known as the Institute for the Works of Religion, operates with integrity. He has also cracked down on dubious financial dealings, including removing high-ranking officials who were involved in scandals. But perhaps the most emotional and urgent issue has been the Church's response to abuse scandals. Pope Francis has met with survivors, issued apologies, and called for stricter measures to protect children and vulnerable individuals. He introduced new rules requiring clergy to report abuse cases and created mechanisms to hold bishops accountable. These steps are far from perfect, but they mark a significant shift toward accountability. Transparency is more than just an administrative goal. It's about rebuilding trust. For many, the Catholic Church is not just a religious institution, but a source of spiritual guidance and moral leadership. By addressing its past failures with honesty, the Vatican is taking critical steps to heal and move forward. Inclusivity has become a hallmark of Pope Francis's papacy, and it's reshaping how the Vatican connects with people worldwide. Unlike his predecessors, Pope Francis has taken a softer, more understanding tone on divisive issues, signaling a shift in the Church's approach. Take, for example, his stance on LGBTQ+ individuals. While the Church's official doctrine on marriage hasn't changed, Pope Francis has emphasized compassion and acceptance. His famous remark, "Who am I to judge?" about gay individuals seeking God, marked a significant moment of openness. He has also expressed support for civil unions as a way to protect the legal rights of same-sex couples, a controversial but bold move within the Church. Pope Francis is also vocal about embracing the marginalized, whether it's advocating for migrants and refugees, speaking out against racism, or condemning income inequality. He's shown a deep commitment to making the Church a voice for the voiceless. This message resonates with younger generations who value social justice and inclusivity in their communities. As we watch the Vatican navigate these changes, one thing is clear: transformation is not a sign of weakness, but of strength. It's a reflection of faith, hope, and a deep commitment to serving humanity in all its diversity. And who knows? Perhaps these transformations will inspire each of us to reflect on how we, too, can embrace change in our own lives. Subscribe to the channel for more deep dives into the moments and movements that shape our world. And if this transformation left you with questions or thoughts, share them below. We'd love to hear what you think.